Right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, The Future of HR in the Digital Age, with the spotlight on the banking industry. We've got an exceptionally exciting panel for you today, who will introduce themselves in a few seconds. Let me take this opportunity first to welcome all that is listening, to welcome the panelists, and to thank you again in advance for giving up your time and being willing to share the knowledge that you have gained throughout the years within this industry and within the digital space that you are in. So very grateful for that. Thank you so much. My name is Linda Kutsia. I am currently the country head of Regenesis Nigeria. So I am coming to you straight from Lagos, Nigeria. Looking forward to this conversation, looking forward to the information and the knowledge and the expertise that you are going to share. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each and every panelist to introduce themselves, say a little bit about your experience, say a little bit about who you are, why this is something that you are interested in, and then of course the company that you are working from or representing today. That would be a great introduction. So let us start. I don't know, shall we go alphabetically? Shall we start with Linda? I see that you are centered already by the events team. So if you would like to kick off the conversation by introducing yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Riss. I'm Group Head of Human Capital for Uber. And that's OOBA, not the taxi company. We're a financial services company. We've been around for just over 20 years. We pioneered mortgage origination in South Africa. So we're not a banking institution or a lender, but we do work very closely with banks, and we are obviously squarely in financial services. This is something that I'm very passionate about, and I think I'm going to be reflecting a little bit on some of the data that came out of the World Economic Jobs Report 2020. And it speaks to sort of the future of careers and HR in the world of work. And I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you get some value from it. And I'm very happy to answer any questions as we go along.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Linda. Shall we move on to Andrew? Andrew, if you would like to introduce yourself. Shall we move on to Andrew?
That mute button has never changed positions. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Marcus, and I'm the CEO. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Command Quality. We're a specialist service provider to the banking and financial services sector, specifically with regards to IT and technology and automation. I've been in this space probably my whole career, so I'm incredibly honored to be here. And to Linda's point, there is some valuable information that's come out of a lot of studies, and also be more than willing to answer any questions that you have. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Yeah, definitely a lot of questions around that data that you're referring to. So, Palisa, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Palisa Matodi. I'm currently the Human Capital Executive for Bidvest Bank. Very well known in the market as a niche Forex bank. But we actually do more than Forex. We've got a huge fleet business. We're also into business banking. And personally, I've spent the last 17 years in the financial sector, so in banking specifically. And it has been a very interesting journey to look at the transformation of what people know banking as, or what banking has become essentially, especially in today's age with so many things changing at a very rapid pace. So I'm definitely looking forward to the conversation today to learn also from everybody in the room. Thank you, Linda.
My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. So we had our first spurt of going offline there. So I'm sorry, Palisa, for interrupting you there. But yeah, what banking has become, that is the last sentence that I've heard. And it is an interesting point that I would love to explore a little bit more. So thank you very much, and my apologies for what just happened. So Lukaniso, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Linda. Lukaniso Mgengo here, currently the COO for investment banking at Nedbank CNIB. Background early, largely around asset management and broader financial services strategy. Then corporate and investment banking, mainly in Southern Africa. Then of recent, before joining Nedbank, covered Americas, North and South America from TS perspective, or transactional services and correspondent banking, and now joined Nedbank both in markets and now within investment banking. So biggest passion of mine is obviously the global influence into the country and the country's influence into the globe, how closely we are working with each other and what influences those have. So excited to get stuck into it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lukaniso. That is definitely the global perspective. I mean, me being an expat and where I am now, and I had to move between banks, it's definitely something that is very interesting, and that's very real, that we're experiencing as individuals. So that's also an exciting point. You see, so many exciting points already just in the introduction. Very grateful. Thank you so much, Dickson. Are you still there?
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone.
If you would like to, perfect. Thank you so much.
No, sure, not a problem. My name is Dickson Eboru. I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer within CIB from an operations perspective for Absa Bank. Very much similar to, I think, Lutano, who went earlier in terms of exposure and experience. 15 years plus within the actual banking industry. Also, previously for that, I think, also experience within the FMCG space and telecom space as well. I mean, I'm very much, keen to obviously add value to this conversation. Very much passionate talking about our young people and hiring and our talent as well, because of what that looks like, and how the digital age is really changing that, and how we gear up, I think, individuals who are entering the actual market, or even currently actually in the market for this particular change. But yeah, looking forward to add as much value to the conversation as much as possible.
Absolutely. I know that you're going to add value. That's such a humble statement to make, but we will definitely learn from you and hear from your experience after that very brief introduction. And then, of course, Manisha, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Morning and afternoon, everyone. I am the director of Zen People Insights. I am a consulting psychologist and a leadership coach. I have worked in the financial services industry for the last 18 years, predominantly in leadership development, organizational development, talent management, and coaching. Passionate about this particular topic only because I think that, in the last 2 to 3 years, I think HR, people practitioners, people development practitioners have come to the forefront of assisting business to drive growth, innovation, and learning. And I think we not only have earned our place at the table, we have shown that we have a lot to actually give towards organizations. I think I'm interested and excited to actually learn from everyone around, how the synergies between the future of HR, technology, what skills, in order to keep us at the table, as well as answer any questions around how can we create an environment where people feel they can easily develop skills and have a learning mindset.
Oh, that is such interesting issues that you've raised already. And I think we should leverage on that as an introductory question to everybody is exactly where the past 3 years, right? How do you see the banking and finance sector landscape shaping up in this post-COVID-19 period where we were forced to adapt, we were forced to be agile, we were forced to change, we were forced to look at things differently. Tell us a little bit more about your experience there. Shall I ask you, Manisha, to start that conversation for us, and then we will take it through to the other panelists. Is that okay with you? Perfect. Thank you so much.
So I think, in some of the changes would be, I think, the most obvious around the fact that very quickly, where most organizations had their 3-year, 5-year, 10-year digital transformation strategy, they found that very much overnight they needed to mobilize the workforce, they to mobilize the people, get them connected at home, business continuity, ensuring that we continued with our day-to-day, providing to the customer, but also making sure that we were able to do that through the different digital platforms. So that transformation happened really quickly. We also learned that we're pretty agile, right? We're pretty agile. We can move really quickly when we need to. When we're in a crisis, we don't only survive, but we're actually able to thrive. I think that's where some of the changes, I think from a people perspective, was really around realizing over the last 2 to 3 years that it was needing to utilize the technology for connection, around emotional connection, connecting with people and ensuring that we were all on the same page and that the team was moving in the same direction.
Look at Niso, I see you were shaking your head when Manisha was talking about transformation. I wonder if you would like to add to that.
Sure. I think it's probably also important to take a step back here and look at 2008, right? When most of the banks were probably caught a little bit off by both from a regulatory, both from an operations perspective, and even the regulators, there were quite a lot of changes subsequent to that, which led to a balance of two things, which is why I was nodding and shaking, which is this time around, you probably saw that banks had to play a different role during COVID, right? It's both influencing regulatory change with the government, both assisting a lot of industries, including ours, that got hit very hard. So, and also just the way of working, as Manisha alluded to, that's probably the biggest one, right? At the time I was in markets, which you would know in the dealing room, trading outside the floor was not a thing, right? I see Dickson smiling there. But the biggest thing was then all of a sudden China and Hong Kong regulators said, everybody go home. So then it became a decision we had to make very quickly. And to be fair, nobody knew what that looks like. So it's been a very big learning journey. And it's been a very big point where we see a lot of industries coming together and seeing how we actually work together going forward. And I think lastly, from a people's perspective, it's probably become much more personal in a space where normally, especially financial services, really it's about, you get in, you tick the box, you leave. But now it's much more about finding out where people are at, meetings with cats walking around and your children there as well contributing to the meeting. So it's quite a balance of a tough time, but also a very human time.
Absolutely. Andrew, I see your reaction. If you would like to add to that.
Absolutely. I think that, the hardy-dars is a famous South African thing that no matter what, everyone got to know what they were and they were all excusable at some time or other. But to your point, from a people aspect, I'll touch on that first because I'm a huge fan of the talent that we have in South Africa and how to access that. But from the people perspective, I think we all, as professionals at some other point, would have updated our LinkedIn profiles. But, we didn't really have the matching CV. So this gave us time to really understand what we were good at, update these technologies that are free. So when I say it's free, it is free to both the consumer, being the banking services sector, and to the candidate. So updating those things, you would have to potentially, go directly to a bank if they were sourcing people. And then the next step was obviously, how do we meet? So those things were definitely challenged. But I do think it's a process that had to be overhauled and looked at. Like one of the other panelists said, that it was time to expedite all of these new age way of doing things. And I think that's definitely something that COVID has taught us. But being in the banking and financial services, we all know that the banks are relatively prepared and very well prepared to continue running as normal should anything happen. It's just we didn't think this would happen. So I think it's given a great opportunity from a people perspective to reinvent that cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, reinvention, I think is the key of what we all had to do, whether we like it or not, whether we fear change or not. Linda and Palesa, I both saw you writing, making notes. Linda, would you like to comment? Would you like to further the comments there?
I think everything's been captured really well. I think what would be an interesting sort of point to move to is around the future and how we see things changing. So I'd like to weigh in on that when the time comes. So I'm going to hand over
to Palesa.
Palesa.
Sure, yes, please, Palesa.
Maybe just to add there as well, I think, with in banking, one of the things that we're good at is not just focusing on today, but looking at what's coming in the next couple of years, and the conversations around what are the future skills, how do we experiment, how do we explore, we're already in play over the last couple of years. But what COVID did was make sure that we exercise the plans and we stop thinking about it and we do something about it. But what I noted as well was, as a consumer, your needs changed. All of a sudden, I didn't need to go shopping to buy a grocery. I could click an app and get the food a bit delivered at home. So we live in a world where our customers know what they want, they know how to get it, and there's many options on the table. That means as a bank as well, you are not the only option that's on the table. Really, you can shift from one bank to the other on a click of a button without leaving your house. And we needed to contemplate or put our customers, when we say, and a lot of businesses or organizations, they have that customer first, but you really had to live it. In the advent of COVID. Some of the questions that I think we grappled with, or even some of the colleagues in other organizations that we're grappling with, is the issue of how do you lead? How do you manage performance, right? When your employees are not there and you don't see what they're doing. If I share a personal story, I had a new team. And for exactly 2 years, I never once met my team, that my direct reports, because of COVID, because I just started and then we moved to working from home. But also I had the portfolios I was responsible for in Africa region. So I was responsible for 17 countries. I couldn't go and build the relationships in person. So they know who Palesa was, but I had to use technology to build the relationships, sufficient relationships to enable me to contribute on the table. So we had to think fast and to think on our feet. I think that was really important. But the last point is around the skills themselves. I spent the first 3 years in IT. And what that has taught us is actually, the banks or organizations, we say we are flexible, you can work from anywhere. COVID made us live that. We had a lot of people that left us but stayed in the country. So they worked for a company in the UK, in Dubai, they didn't have to leave. And all of a sudden, in some of the core skills like security or software development, we were competing with global organizations. And they could give what we couldn't give because of the strength, I guess, or lack of the rand. But also the flexibility that they provided, because they didn't require our people to cross countries, and which is what also still remains on a daily basis. And I think it's not just that, it's any country. We had to grapple, how do we build these skills at an accelerated pace? Because we're not the only ones, everybody's in the same boat. We all looking for the same skills. You can talk about EVP, but when the tap is actually empty, your build strategy actually has to be really, really strong.
Yeah, competing, that's very valuable. Competing for the same skill globally is I think one of the conundrums that we can touch on as well. Dickson, you was talking about, was you or Lukaniso talking about the global perspective and getting that global perspective? I don't know if you'd like to add to what Pallister said.
Yeah, I think, look, Pallister touched on some of the key points that we've obviously facing. I think particularly as a bank, so from an Absa perspective, our retention strategies had to go into overtime. I think we did see quite a number of key skills being tried to be, well, pushed from our side. And it wasn't only local, but also from a global perspective. Personally, from our side, on the Absa side, we are going to aggressively where, after the actual Barclays exit, we are now trying to consolidate all our 9 countries from an African sense into one sort of digital platform. So there's a lot of inbuilt house platforms that we're building. So it was very key for us to sort of lock down those resources, anticipating, the poaching that's sort of currently actually happening at the moment. And true to the point that Pallister mentioned, flexibility with our employees was something key that we needed to actually gear up and be ready to actually support, to the point of where, working from home was, the actual norm itself. Currently at the moment within our bank, we only require employees to come in at least once or twice a week, depending on what your role actually is itself. But I think the challenge also comes is, like Pallister had mentioned, having a new team and dealing with those individuals remotely. It is a challenge. And particularly when you look at the new joiner who's coming in, how do you sort of define that culture and instill those skills remotely? It's definitely quite hard itself. Again, that's one challenge I still think, I'm sure, my various panelists on the call itself are still grappling with, is that new joiners who have very little experience, and you're trying to do this whole remote joining and trying to instill that culture, define certain particular things, and get the actual performance that you're expecting to get out of the employee itself. And I think it's sort of very critical that as much as yes, COVID has actually come, I think if you're instilling and driving the right high performance culture within your areas and stuff, then it becomes measuring productivity is something you already do. It's already instilled in your culture. So there isn't then this last minute scramble around how your team's performing and how do you get the best out of them.
So shall we continue with that conversation that you just started, Dickson, is how do you get your team to perform? You talk about challenges. How do you overcome those challenges? What are the challenges? Are the challenges you think unique to your sector, to your industry, to your bank, or how, this I think a lot has been said about explore skills and keeping those skills within the South African companies, not just within the country, which was our previous challenge. So maybe if we could explore that a little bit, talk to me about the challenges and overcoming those challenges and your experience in overcoming those challenges. If there's someone specific who would like to answer the question, or shall I put Lukaniso on the spot?
I'm glad you did, because
thank you.
so look,
thank goodness.
I think the biggest thing that most of our colleagues here on the call and just the broader industry have been trying to do, we've been trying to look for this blue sky, light from the sky solution, and it actually is not as significant as that from an operational perspective. The first thing to consider is we needed to look at each other from a banking sector, look at what the international banks were doing. An example is sort of flexi working, virtual working, I was exposed to from 2015. So when COVID happened, at the time it was New York, it was a matter of close your laptop, go home. So it wasn't as matter of as large as in some other places. So my point is using those type of dynamics to talk to each other as competitors, as the industry, to say, look, how did you go about going through this challenge or planning for the future from a work perspective? Also, similar to Balisa, probably same period, my teams have been mostly virtual since they've been spread in different parts of the globe. So building a team dynamic to people who have many country stakeholders, but also have to build a team of different diverse individuals and new people joining in different parts of the world, as I said, has been quite a challenge, right? But the biggest thing is trying to build that rapport with the team and trying to understand where their strengths and areas of improvement are, and sharing a lot more of the portfolio than what we were doing before. So I think that probably a point that's lost to me, but that's quite critical, is from a joining and a development perspective. It's first and foremost, new joiners, the 20, 21-year-olds that are joining now are much more vocal. They will tell you exactly what they think and what they want. So which is a very good thing, right? But also a very uncomfortable thing for a lot of the managers. So we found a change to a much more people-focused management structure, where a lot of, let's talk about what you want to do next. Instead of that fear of retention, how do we retain by opening up more opportunities for you to grow, hopefully within the institution, but obviously it can happen that it's outside as well. I think a point that Dickson alluded to as well is the biggest issue that we face right now, which I don't have an answer for, is, I mean, you've got countries that like the US and the UK that are bringing in skills visas with no sponsors required. You've got nomad visas. I've got a friend who lives here but has been working for a US company and flies up there a couple of times a year. So the way of working is really, really changing, right? So for Dickson, for example, is how do you use those 9 countries to then open up more opportunities for new joiners, for staff. The younger staff are saying they want to leave the country. So how do you enable that, but not lose that South African skill set by keeping it within the group? So same thing we are working with. So a lot to consider, but I think there's been some movement, but I think there needs to be a lot of collaboration in terms of the country lens of how we keep our skill set within the country, because we're bleeding quite a lot in terms of South African skill set to Europe and probably the US at the moment.
Please, Andrew, if you would like to add to that.
I most definitely would like to add to that. I think it's something that's, it's been how we overcame this particular hurdle in COVID is something that's been in the inner workings of command quality for many, many years. So at times, there may be opportunities for us to share the workload with, our international counterparts and things like that. And it potentially does come at a reduced rate, to get the same amount of work done. And that was something that really baffled me for many years. And, how do I remain competitive in this niche market when we've got these unbelievably talented people sitting right on our doorsteps and we have a high unemployment rate? This, it just didn't make sense as to why we weren't accessing these people. Anyway, I did a lot of investigation around this topic, and I thought, well, let's give it a go and let's train people on exactly what we want them to do. So we did that, and the price points were met, and our customers graciously invited these people into their environments, and were pleasantly surprised that these young South Africans with degrees, more than one, were sitting without jobs. So that just gave us the opportunity to keep our internal training and development program going and really perfecting that skill. So when I think it was one of the other panelists saying that, you know, the visa thing is a requirement or non-requirement, or you can or you can't, we saw a lot of skill leaving towards the deeper parts of lockdown, going back to their countries of origin, and that gap needing to be filled. And we actually did a graduate program during lockdown. But to the other panelists' point was, we'd been preparing them from a skill point, which was crystal clear, but we were also preparing them for a work life, which changed overnight. All of a sudden, they were coming into our office so we could get the culture right. We said, okay, cool, you know, you don't have to do that anymore. We're doing this this intern program from home. So for them and for us, that was a massive adjustment, and they did very well. And luckily it happened then, you know, because that was the new way of working. So I think key to our strategies is to, if you were thinking of training people internally, it's a good thought. And I think it has saved several people. So training and development should be, I think, top of the line, because as we are now in the Great Resignation as well, those skills and people that are rolling off of your internal training programs, you can plug the holes and gaps a lot sooner, as opposed to filling them at a premium. But they have got the expertise that your organization has. They have got your culture that you need to take your organization to the next level. So it's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah. So touching the point that Manisha made earlier, that it really puts HR at the strategic level of any business decision making. Touching the point that Lakisa has also made, how do you give, or how do you make it attractive for those people, succession, to and giving them the opportunities to grow, not just in a position, but also in knowledge and skills, which then also brings what is your rewarding system into play, into question. How do we reward? Are we only rewarding financially, or is a reward also that I'm adding to your skill set? I don't know, I'm just putting it out there. Linda, I don't know if this is the time for you to have your conversation, or to add value to that future skill set that you were talking about, because surely we're starting to say, well, you can't just be the one and be comfortable. I'm a financial analyst and that's what I'm going to be for the rest of my life, because change is inedible.
Absolutely.
That's what we need to prepare everyone for, that agility. So maybe if you would like to add value to that, or add to that conversation.
Sure. So the prediction was that by 2025, which is not that far away, half of the work done in business will be done by people and half will be done by machines, which is quite a scary stat if you think about it globally. And, you know, couple that with the fact that more than half of your workforce is going to need reskilling, and are probably going to need it within a very short space of time. They're estimating about 6 months you're going to have to reskill half of your workforce. We've certainly experienced that. There's increasing automation. You know, there are a number of jobs that are now clearly going to no longer exist. And actually, ironically, financial jobs are very high up on that list of jobs that will no longer exist in the future. So, you know, if you look at some of the trend or the predictions, accountants, bookkeepers, financial directors, those types of jobs are increasingly going to become automated. The jobs that are not going to become automated are obviously the jobs that require empathy and human traits and characteristics. But certainly the skills of the future, it's data, it's development, it's very tech orientated. And it's a space women actually don't play in as much as men. We still tend to be in the marketing, HR, content development type roles, but you don't find us very much in the data analysis, software development type roles. So for people thinking of, you know, a future career, those are certainly places where there will only be where there will be exponential growth in career opportunities. And I think clients are going to become you know, specifically in our industry, I think clients are going to become increasingly intolerable of having to either visit or telephone an institution. I want to be able to do everything on my app. This morning, I needed to engage with Nedbank actually. And I remember that I could speak to the little chat function. And the minute I had to be phoned and transferred to another division, I was irritated because I wanted to be able to do everything via the chat function. I think clients are going to become increasingly intolerant of that. I think where there are transactions that are really big and emotional and intense and high stakes, people are still going to want to engage with an individual. But yeah, a lot of it's quite scary how many jobs are going to become redundant, and also quite encouraging how many jobs are going to become available, new jobs that will exist. They estimating that you know, in excess of and I'm referring to the World Economic Forum Jobs Report 2020, which is 2 years old already. So I'm hoping that there'll be another one out in October. They normally do them every 2 years. But 85 million jobs will become redundant, but 97 million will come into existence. What they are, I'm not quite sure yet. There are some predictions on what they might be. But yeah, we're in for a really, really interesting time, I think, in terms of the need to reskill people, reskill them quickly. The average age in our business is about 43, 44. We're not we don't have a millennial business. And things were very manual prior to COVID. And all of a sudden things are very, very much online. And we had a workforce who was accustomed to asking a client to emailing a PDF, asking the client to print it and fill it in and scan it and send it back. And that's changed completely in the space of 12 months. It's now send the client a link, let them upload their documents themselves. And you've got a consultant sitting there going, well, what am I supposed to do now? Because I was used to being on the phone with the person and talking them through the form. And so, you know, there's a whole other set of skills that they've got to learn. So those are some of the realities in our space.
And I think you are touching on many things here. It is reskilling. And I think that the general idea about reskilling, like you also rightfully said, there's a lot of tech, but those jobs that are going to be ones that we recognize, if we can put it that way, is going to require a certain element of humanness that not everyone, and again, the assumption, it's so terrible to say, but the assumption that within your industry, that humanness is you know, the empathy, the emotional intelligence, the all of those type of qualities that is not always assumed with what we think an accountant is, you know, but those are also reskilling that means, you know, I hate the word, but the soft skills, it's not soft. It's the most difficult to actually get people to get that behavior, you know, that behavioral issues there. Manisha, I don't know if you would like to add, yeah, as a coach, maybe you can talk to us about the fear of that what Linda is actually talking about as well, because people are, you know, the machines are taking my job, things like that. How do we to make sure that fear doesn't overpower, because the possibility of the 97 million jobs that you were talking about that doesn't exist yet is also very exciting, because we can create what we need, which is what everyone also alluded to. So maybe Manisha, if you would like to add to that.
So I think in terms of, as you rightfully said, you know, there is always an element of fear when it's uncertainty, complexity, anything that's different. And I think the important thing is around positioning that and assisting people to really change their mindset around the way they think about their roles and the value that they add. So taking a financial role, for instance, there's certain elements that will be automated, and that I think goes with that role. It also could be some of the HR roles, for instance. It could be some of the administrative roles. So the areas where we need to focus on is kind of saying, okay, let's reskill, let's evolve this role into something where you're going to be a partner with business. So rather than working around, just inputting data and be a, data capture or financial data, kind of saying, but let's maybe look at how we can work with the data. How can we marry data analytics with financial? How can we use financial modeling? How can we rather be an internal consultant business rather than just inputting the information and sending it in a spreadsheet, for instance? So it's about helping people reimagine what the future would look like for them, and how can they actively play a part in that. So also around giving them a little bit of control around, say, but what do I control, and what is it that I just need to be uncomfortable with and be okay with that? I think that's some of the elements that I've noticed around how to manage fear. And I think also around, leaders specifically needing to say, but what, maybe I need to create a safe space. I need to create a psychologically safe space where people can start talking about these fears. People can start talking about new ideas and new ways in which we can actually evolve all these roles that might actually be obsolete in the future.
Okay. I reimagine and rethink. Andrew, you indicated in the chat box a little bit earlier that you actually focus on women, and you actually that the initiatives that you do. It was when Linda was talking about the lack of females. I'm so grateful that there's such strong ones on the panel today. So good work, events team. So I don't know if you would like to just add to that, and maybe it links to also what Manisha is saying as far as reimagining is concerned, because there are definite tradition, culture, deep-rooted reimagining that needs to take place when we talk about this.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for raising that, Linda. I think it's a very, very sensitive point around what we do as organizations and aiming for those goals when we have got equalities and those things that we need to consider. And I speak specifically from an engineering space, as we are an automation company. That is what we do. So it is heavily reliant on software engineers, and that is a male predominant space on a global scale. It doesn't matter what it is. That is a problem and challenge that we've seen within our graduate programs and internal programs that we run. No matter how much we try, we don't get females that even apply. And that was definitely the case, I think, for several years. And we searched hard and we tried different aspects. And all of a sudden, we got a lot of females coming through, and a lot of females that were coming through strongly in terms of getting through the technical assessments and being able to do the work and being able to compete on the same scale. And it was so nice to see the feedback from our male engineer force saying, well done. It's so necessary for the workforce. It brings a softer dynamic. It brings so much to the table. So it is actually really nice to see that dynamic is changing. How or why it's changing, I'm not entirely sure, but we've definitely seen from a client space, our clients, there are definitely more females in very technical positions. From our take-ons that we do for our interns, definitely more females entering this job market. But I think it also speaks volumes to the millennials, I don't even know if they exist anymore. They're probably my age now. But, it speaks volumes to the culture that you have. And it's so nice to see that the gents on the programs that we put together, how they work together as one and assist the females if they need to with anything. But it's definitely something that is changing. And I think as an organization, it is our dream to have a predominantly higher percentage female grad program at one point. That's certainly my goal, and so I'll let you know when that happens. And how we did it. All of these things are trial and error every now and then, but it is changing. And then I just have one point on the people that are scared about their jobs, especially with automation taking over. So if we're looking at the banking sector specifically, we've got mainframe and we've got very old technologies. And some people and employees have been with the bank for many, many years. If they even started at a teller level and then moved into head office and then became business analysts and then became, all kinds of analysts or whatever, those people are the ones that are likely to be more scared of their jobs being replaced by this crazy robotics AI stuff that we talk about today. When in fact, you should actually be more open to the younger generation and share your information, because without your knowledge, they can't do their jobs. They are such assets because they've been there, they've seen all the mistakes, they've seen all these new things. And ultimately, automation and AI is so important, but it does come from somewhere. Somebody sits with the knowledge, and it does come from these people. So I think we should be very careful when we do these restructures as to who we get rid of and why, and who we bring in and why. So, I think it's a very careful thing, and with salaries being what they are, I think, and it does give birth to opportunities where they go, okay, I'm no longer needed. I'll come back as a consultant at triple my salary. But then the problem with that is now we're creating an unharmonious work environment, because you were an employee yesterday. Today you're a business owner, triple the salary. So we must be careful about the decisions we take and how we augment where we're going from a future point.
That's absolutely. I heard in one of the previous webinars, one of the speakers saying that people are definitely the champions of our organizations. Absolutely. But systems and processes win championships, and those people informing systems and processes are the people who's been doing the job, knows what works, knows what didn't work, knows what you tried before, and leverage on that, which again substantiates everyone's point as the strategic importance of HR. You can see that even in financial decisions cannot be made without HR's input, because our human resources are, yes, most expensive, but you can make mistakes like this that actually ends up costing the company even more. Palisa, I don't know if you would like to add, or Linda would like to add to the conversation what Andrew said. I saw your head when Andrew was talking about inclusion of women and making sure that we have an equal representation of gender within the field that you are in. Palisa, would you like to add to that?
Yes. I wanted to mention first that our CIO and our chief executive are both females, so we are definitely doing something right at Bidvest Bank. Thanks, Andrew, for that. But it's important to be very intentional about some of these things. What we've done in the past, in all my roles, is, and you try. Andrew is right that sometimes the representations, even at application level, it's not there. But the intention is important, that you want to bring in more females than males, and in any jobs, not just in technical roles, in your finance, audit, governance, you find still mostly men in many senior roles in many organizations. So you want to be intentional. You want to skew your graduate programs towards more females than males, so that you can balance the equation as you grow along. The I'm a firm believer in graduate programs. The value proposition is it does not even need convincing for many organizations. So you start it at the beginning and you can build in solidly going forward. I wanted to also just add to, I think it was Manisha's point around the fear or the mindset. I think mindset, working on the mind is the most critical, or the change management process, that we are now living in a world where things change often, drastically often, and you want your employees to know that things will continuously be changing, and they should not be scared that things will be changing, but it's how we position the change that's quite important to have that buy-in with all your employees. And then the last point was around, I think it was your point, Linda, on the role HR plays in these changes. First, we as human capital professionals, HR professionals, people and culture, we're also impacted by the change from a skills requirement, right? We need to adapt. Otherwise, we will always be reacting to the changes that the business is proposing. And we'll always be the police instead of help the organization transition, help the organization transform. And the biggest change I think I've seen over the last 3 years specifically is the role that learning or the learning individuals have played at the table. Learning used to be, those people, you tell them what training is required. The role of the learning head, a lot of organizations have brought in chief learning officers and so on, because learning has become strategic in nature. It plays a very critical role in the transformation that we're all going through. So the HR, it's in one of my in my teams, actually, in many of the conversations around the need for us. We can't be talking to our employees on transform. You need to be constantly learning when we're not learning, and learning has changed. Google, if I don't know something, I go www and I get an answer, I learn something. It can be seconds. Gone are the days where I have to go register for a program and take a year to learn. Macro learning, micro certifications to learn the skill that I require, because maybe I just need this, not the whole shebang. There's a place for everything, but I think small, on time, impactful learning is quite important, and we need to get our people to understand that learning comes in all shapes and forms. This panel right now, we're all learning a lot. It's a learning event. Sometimes it requires formal training. Sometimes it's as good as YouTube.
Yeah. Lukaniso, you spoke about the opportunities for people to grow. Andrew, you spoke about that, but you linked it to the personal experience that people are experiencing. And we all employees, employers, but we are all, Manisha, I cannot wait to hear what you have to say, but we are all consumers as well. We want the personal experience ourselves, and therefore expect it in the workplace as well. Manisha, you would like to, your hand was up if you would like to add to that, or anyone else, but let Manisha, you can start. And then Lukaniso, if you would like to add to that. Thank you so much, Manisha. And then Andrew. Yes.
Lisa and Andrew brought up really interesting points. I think the first one around, diversity and inclusion includes, yes, representation of more females, but we need diversity and inclusion of every kind. It needs to be about gender, it needs to be about ethnicity, it's about different opinions, different ways of thinking, because that's where innovation and growth happens. It's really from diverse ways of thinking. And with that, also diversity, diversity and inclusion is, the idea around, I think, with the learning aspect as well, is that, we need to reskill, we need to upskill is across all professions, including HR. So, the new HR professional practitioner 2.0 or 4.0, if you want to call it, is really breadth of skills with some depth of expertise, with great business acumen. And I think that also comes down to some of the other, roles that we were talking about, some of the other professions we were speaking about. And I think I got a really great example of one of the heads that I work with, one of the banks. And she actually said during COVID, she lost so many of her team members only because they started thinking about what was the meaning of their lives, and they weren't going to work all day. And they decided, no, but you know what? Work-life integration, not necessarily balance, and their families were more important than work. And what she actually did was, which I thought was so ingenious, was she sat with the team, she looked at what their strengths were, she looked at what their capabilities were with the HR, and she actually multi-skilled her IT team. And that was fantastic. She's got a developer, a project manager, a solutions architect, all rolled up into one. And she said we can work off multiple projects with limited skill set. And I thought that was just absolutely innovative. And that really came from learning the mindset of let's do things differently and utilizing their HR and learning capabilities to get the team upskilled.
Absolutely. Look on yourself.
Sure. Yeah, look, I want to, it seems the previous point has hit a lot of hearts here. I want to just add on that as well. Look, diversity, equity, and inclusion is something for me that is hugely impactful. Firstly, Andrew made a point to this. Diversity is a strength to the business. It's a strength to the market. So that's why we're seeing a lot more of it. Right, gone are the traditional ways of work. So part of that is the traditional faces that you'd see in the type of work, right? So now DE&I is very critical. It's a journey that we've been focused on quite significantly. COVID was a time to talk quite a lot, and not just talk at a high level, but get very uncomfortable in that creation of psychological safety, right? So, and out of that uncomfort, actually, it was a lot of what are the problem statements? And then once you formulate those problem statements, which are both top down and bottom up, then guess what? The same people need to come up with a solution, right? So it's not the market is going to solve itself, or the systems are going to sort us out, but we need to actually then influence the solutions as well. So that's been a big journey of ours. And then the last point, which I think is you need to be very, very vocal and intentional about firstly, transformation, and secondly, gender. Linda made mention to this, and Manisha as well, is it's not just about, you have to look at the bigger spectrum as well. You're getting a lot more of stay-at-home dads nowadays to support their partners. You have same-sex partners. So how do you look at it from when you have a child perspective, right? So it's a lot to consider and a lot to be informed and learn about, right? So you can't think that you are an ally, for example, is not a lecturer. You are there to learn and to facilitate the growth conversations of that. So then just on the development piece, as you mentioned, I think that the biggest one on the development side for us and personally for me is now we're seeing a lot of, if I use the example of the systems, is typically you have the dev team, right, developing, but now you have the systems and maintenance side, which used to be people on the phone, as Linda mentioned. But now you need to train the same people to be actually service engineers and service maintenance staff within that system, because you still need to have somebody behind that chat box, because believe you me, an automated chat box will send you the same answer and eventually you'll want to scream at a head. So, and then there's that unlucky soul will pick up the phone and get your force, right? So the biggest point for development is understanding, firstly, for me, the most I'm passionate about is understanding the scope of the business so that we don't overpromise and underdeliver. The second is once you have that scope of what we can achieve, is then we list what we can achieve for the period. So we have a higher conversion rate of that. And I think lastly is then understanding that, number one, learning, Balisa made mention to this, I'm very big on it. Short, impactful skills learning is big at the moment. So, and that's what we need. The COO office is attached to the hip to HR, right? It used to be one of those that HR comes in when we need them. That was the business perspective, right? But nowadays it's actually all inclusive, like you said. Offsites, strategy, finance, HR has to be there. Similarly, when HR is speaking about their strategies, business has to be there to impact about the scope, etc. So it's a lot more, I think I referred to in the beginning, a lot of collaboration and a lot more short targeted training to make sure that we're getting the skill set for the future as well. Thanks.
Andrew, I see there's 2 comments in the chat box as well. And then Linda, are you waving or is that your hand up?
I was clapping. I was clapping,
okay.
But I'm going to put my hand up.
Okay, perfect. So Andrew, if you would like to add to that conversation.
Absolutely. So I think traditionally, if we look at who HR is and what they're supposed to be doing, they would collect the CV, present it, and you will get your salary. And if you don't, you know who to go to. And I think that mind shift needs to, and potentially, hopefully, has been shifted and changed, because I think we evolved on to possibly giving our HR partners a job specification that hasn't necessarily been updated in some time. And then, you get presented with a candidate that isn't necessarily successful. So my question is, who is at fault here? Did you not give the correct message to HR? Because we're now expecting somebody that has a very traditional job in HR, as it were, to be a talent acquisition specialist in IT. So to the other panelist's point, it's definitely an environment where we need to be more inclusive. We need to educate our HR partners over and above already what they do for us is phenomenal, but exactly the impact that this individual has in the business, what we are looking for, and how to identify them. And that coupled with training, right? So there are 2 types of training. The first type of training, I'm not a big fan of, it's a certificate of attendance, because I can print one of those out. So, but it's no disrespectful to anyone that gets one, no disrespect to anyone that gets one. But if we are going to train somebody and invest in the training, make sure that there is an international certification attached to it, and they can write it, and there's a pass or a fail. So ultimately, if we have that standard in the organization, then it would mean that we are supporting our fellow staff members to go and be similarly certified, and they would add value together. Not only are you doing that, you're also aiding this person's future. We don't want people to leave us, right? But they inevitably do. But you want them to have the best footing forward if you genuinely invest in people. But there are also the uncertified certifications that I'm not a big fan of, but it's not the same as a certificate of attendance, but that we can definitely do. There are a lot of online platforms, I'm not going to mention them right now, but that you can go and investigate yourself and go and upskill yourself in whatever discipline or whatever position you sit in the organization. I believe it's a time for everyone to work together, like one of the other panelists said, and how we can get this job done. What does business expect? What does IT expect? What do operations expect? How can we all make this come together and retain people as best we can and deliver projects?
And as an individual, also take responsibility to not just focus on the one skill that you're good at, It's to challenge yourself as well. There is a certain sense of responsibility that, it's not just the employer's responsibility to ensure your growth. And I think that's also a very important point that we need to make. You have to instill that need from the opportunity to grow, yes, but any employee has to take that opportunity. Linda, your hand was up.
So yes, it's
And then Palisa.
absolutely a shared responsibility, but it is unfortunately businesses' baby to develop people for our needs and for the way that we know we're going to have to work going forward. So, I mean, tertiary sort of business relevance for tertiary education, of course, Regenesis is different, but is about 50%. And I've got 4 HR interns with me at the moment. They're with me for a while, and I look at these 4 young men, and I think, I wonder to what extent you are learning the things you really need to know. And kind of I'll say, have you guys covered this? Have you covered this? And then they look at me blankly, and I just think, oh my goodness, you're going to come out of that very expensive qualification, having some theory, but I really don't know that you're going to get the kind of stuff you need to know. So it is up to business, unfortunately, to do that. And I also think it's up to business to, and HR in particular, when you're having these career conversations, it's about helping people see how their careers can transition, actually. So, if you're doing this job at the moment and there is the very real risk of it becoming redundant in the future, how can you start looking now already at transitioning or reimagining your career going forward? There are natural transitions out of certain jobs, and then there are others that take a little bit more work. So with these 4 gents, I'm kind of, I'm saying, this is HR. There's a lot of stuff in HR, but you could specialize here. You could specialize here. You could look at business analysis. You could look at software development. You could look at many different things rather than just thinking of your job as being the HR manager one day, because it really doesn't work out like that anymore.
I agree with you, and I hear what you were saying 100%. We need to inspire growth as well as the people with the experience and people who knows what the business might need. Palisa, did you just drop? Oh, you're still there. There we go. There we go.
I'm still here. I think Andrew also just brought to the fore conversation around retention, right? Gone are the days where retention was about money. How do I retain this person? Or EVP revolved around money. How do I pay aligned with market or better than the market? And it's about understanding what exactly do employees need, and depending on where they are in life, in your IT type of environment, skills are a currency. They want the latest certifications, they want international certifications, they want different things, because they know, if I've done this, I've got this experience and this exposure, I can later command X reward at a later stage. In other environments, or other people might want, give me more time, or let me work from home. I can still get what, or give you what you need. I just don't want to step a foot in the office. I've got young children. That's my attention right now. So when with COVID and this whole digitization journey, it's about understanding or tailor making your proposition to the employee requirements, instead of putting together a generic organization-wide offer on the table. Because then you will keep coming up with very fancy things, but that don't hit the mark, and they don't talk directly to your people and wonder, why am I bleeding? So I just wanted to weigh in when Andrew mentioned the international certification, so that I'm reading that it's what he values. Palisa might value something else, Dickson might value something else, and as human capital professionals and line leaders, because employees are led by their own leaders. It's not my role as HR to understand what Sophie in credit needs. But that relationship between the line leader and the employee is very important to get to the core of what would keep them engaged, what would keep them in the organization, and how else would they prefer to be grown in the organization.
And the difficulty of HR to match the two, right? The individual personal need of the employee linked to the organizational need and the skills the organization might need in the next 4 to 5 years. Andrew, your hand was up, and then Lukhanyiso, yours as well.
Thank you so much. So I think to Bles's point is we need to be clear as an organization from an IT strategy point. What do we want, and what do those people look like? There is no point in, for example, the people in corporate investment banking or the people in checks and savings or various different retail being on different platforms. If it's Amazon Web Services that we're going for, or Microsoft Azure, then that's what we need to be looking for in terms of certification. I think to make sure that my point is known, that they are very expensive resources, and there are lots of people that say that they can do the job and potentially can't. So that is where the absolute clarity of their certification comes in, is to say, I've got this, and you can actually go and verify it with either Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure. So those, and it also makes, I think, recruiting much simpler. You know, if we know we're looking for this person, this and this and this, that is what we have, and we'll get the right candidates, and they'll add a value much quicker. The second point is, if somebody has only got perhaps 2 of the required certificates, because there are normally a series of 5 to get, 4 and 5 being the hardest. You know, what are we doing from a growth and development point internally to still offer that person an opportunity and put them on some sort of fast track to say, hey, we like what you look like, and you are a good fit as a human being. You're part of our culture. We like you. We can offer you this, and we're going to upskill you. So whilst we're upskilling the person, we're also looking at retention. And because they haven't reached the ultimate goal just yet, the thing that I want to bring across very strongly and carefully is, what happens when this person is qualified? Then it becomes a bidding war, which I think we are all somewhat guilty of fueling, and that is just purely based on the skill shortage. So it's nobody's fault, unfortunately. The demand is out there. I mean, I wish I could train tons and tons of more people in my organization. It's just not always possible. But yeah, so I think, yeah, valid points on those things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Lukhanyiso?
Yes, Andrew, 100%, right? And the bridge between your and Balisa's point here is very valid, because at the end of the day, without any typical business analyst or management consultant process, they gather requirements from the client, then they go out and tell us what the market is doing. We sort of then, at the end of the day, we choose what we want, right? So I think for me, it's just being very intentional amongst the two, HR and business, what we are trying to achieve. HR is an enabler for the business, right? But we, at the end of the day, have to solve our own solutions. I say this all the time in terms of, even you look at a risk perspective, when the second line, which is risk, or third line audit is dabbling in first line of business work. And I'm very quick to say, no, this is a business process, right? And operational risk or HR or support functions are enablers. So we can't then push away the responsibility and say, oh, HR didn't recruit the right one for me. They have a very long process of recruitment, shortlisting, interviews. So, and guess what? We make those decisions, right? I say I want Andrew in the seat. So it's at the end of the day, it's on me, but obviously the partnership element is there. But what I wanted to touch on, you made mention to it, Palisa, was on the retention element. And that's probably a big one right now facing the banking and financial services sector, because we're not only losing to international or local competitors, we're also losing to the industry and also change of industry. The Great Resignation has showed a lot of change in the industry. Dickson made a point of this, saying recruitment is changing from what we want to what we think, right? Because now the following job, I'm sure even if you look at the COO job, there's differences, huge differences between the COO job, depending which institution you're in, or if it's a front office based, middle office based, strategy based. So there's a lot of elements that you need to consider. So I think in that retention element, there's a lot of now, how do we do the flexibility within the organization to say that you might find that there's somebody who's very good at risk and actually sitting within the front line, and how do we enable that person to get there? If we're getting an opportunity where there's a change of staff or retirement, how do we in the time that's remaining, skill up some of those people who would like that opportunity? So there's a lot of retention methods that we need to consider in amongst, fighting with fintechs, new companies coming up, and all of that is happening. So it's a huge question mark. Definitely not an answer from me, but it's probably a lot of thoughts that we are grappling with at the moment.
So Manisha, I see your hand. Dickson, I also see yours. And I also want to just acknowledge that we had and thank you very much, Linda, for responding. Petunia on LinkedIn said that I'm in an organization that is restructuring, and this conversation helps me to reflect on what this process means and how I may have to adjust to reposition myself. So you've already, as a panel, made an impact. So I would like to congratulate you on that. But yeah, Petunia, that is, like Linda also rightfully say, it is a question that you continuously have to ask yourself if you're interested in ensuring your relevance throughout your business career, right? Dickson, if you would like to, your hand was up, and then Manisha.
So Lukaniso, I think, touched on the point around where, the emphasis, I think, is moving to not what you know, but how you think. I think, when we're recruiting and HR gives us a plethora of CVs to look at. And fundamentally, that is now the shift of where you see an individual who, maybe doesn't have the experience, yes, maybe has certifications too, which is good, which obviously drives the standard minimum requirement that we obviously require, that Andrew obviously actually mentioned, which is a great base to work from. But knowing that you have an individual who thinks differently and is very flexible and has the agility to do that, I think is a fundamental key to obviously actually identify talent and to move with that talent moving forward. Because then that ability for that individual to take on and tackle different things is definitely actually key. The other point I also want to touch on in terms of how collaborative and how the environment has changed now is, and I think as leaders we need to own a lot more of this, is how we review our succession and talent slates. And more than ever now, that stuff should be reviewed almost on a monthly to a quarterly basis, where you clearly can look at the roles your individuals are actually playing and your ability to obviously increase that exposure, because that also speaks to retention and how you obviously continue to drive that growth, within the actual staff. Gone are the days of where you have someone in tech who can never see themselves doing sales, or someone in operations who can never see themselves, moving into a sales environment. The exposure is a lot more wide. I think it's from my particular sense, when I look at now that we are now dealing with about 9 countries, our succession plates are wide. We actually now have various individuals who are ready in 2 or 3 years and actively driving around, okay, what are the minimum skills required, what skills is actually required to get this individual to where they actually need to go. And driving that quite aggressively, I think, is definitely fundamental.
Fundamental, yeah, fundamental. Manisha, your hand was up, and then Andrew, your hand as well. I'm just mindful of the time, ladies and gentlemen. So after the comments made by Andrew and Manisha, I'm going to ask you as a panel to summarize what you think what you would value the participants to take away. What is it that we need, what we need to leave them with? Or I mean, if you want to, the chat is active. If you want to hear how you're impacting the participants, it's phenomenal. So there's many thoughts being shared there. So you're welcome to go and read it. But Manisha and Andrew, and then thereafter, I'm going to ask you to give your final thoughts. So Manisha?
Yeah, I think, we need to step back and take a more strategic view around workforce planning, around how we're actually viewing our talent. Because I think exactly to, Dickson's point is also around, you might find talent somewhere you really wouldn't expect. So we really have to then, I think, start using as a HR and people function, our analytics, our people analytics, to really find the talent we're looking for, the capability, the potential we're looking for within the organization, and really take more of a strategic view, I think, around that. And I think when it really comes to retention, around rewarding individuals and incentivizing individuals, it needs to be customized. It needs to be experience-driven, experience-led. It's about the employee, and the reward must speak to them and keep them motivated and wanting to be in the organization itself. And I think, that comes down to really a human customized experience. And I think that means that as HR, and I think as leaders, we need to use a very collaborative approach to say, how can we use this real-time data that we have, because it's everywhere, this big data, and how can we use it to really drive creating these experiences we're looking for, and pinpoint, what solutions we actually need to find. Because sometimes what we think the solutions are and what the problems are might sometimes be very far from what the data is really telling us. So maybe some data-driven problem solving and decision making is sometimes also needed.
Absolutely. I mean, any decision should be based in research. You can't just make a decision anymore and think that it's going to be sustainable without really backing it in evidence. So I agree with you, absolutely. And the personalization, ladies and gentlemen, looks as though that is where the world is moving towards, not looks as though we as consumers know that that's what we want. So why not expect that from our employers as well? Just the bonus at the end of the year is not good enough for every employee, and we need to, good enough, but because people they want that money because they do something with it. Find out what it is that they do that with, and maybe that is the individualized reward system that you need to consider. Andrew, before we go to our final thoughts.
Thank you, Lila. I'll be very quick on that. So with regards to the skill shortage that we're facing, we're often chasing people with 5 to 7 years experience because of X, Y, and Z. I think that there is a fundamental gap in the way that potentially we assess somebody's ability. I have been so surprised. There are people that are on the line and in the audience and potentially on the panel that trialed out something for us and just couldn't get enough. And that was, we'll never forget this moment, because it was a sale of promise that this young South African has got all the talent in the world. I promise you, just give them an opportunity. And since then, our relationship has just flourished. But let's be very careful about overpaying for things that we don't need to. and making sure that we can invite juniors into the organization. Otherwise, we're forever going to be trapped in this very expensive bubble of whatever this type of role is, But at the same time, if you take a junior on, make sure that you have something to supplement them, and they can feel supported, and that they are adding value. I think that's my last point. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a very interesting conversation. I am touched and honored to have had the opportunity to facilitate such cardinal issues within not just your industry, but within the HR environment, and I think within the HR environment within any industry, because these are the things that we are grappling with, and these are the things that we are forced to be agile about. Your experience and your influence just substantiates all of that. So I'm going to stop saying, I see there's another message in the, this was an awesome session. Thank you, Nhlanhla. That's lovely of you to say. So if I might ask, I know that there's 5 minutes and there's definitely more than 5 people here. If you would like to make your closing remarks, ladies and gentlemen, shall we start with you, Palisa?
Yes, I'm just going to keep it short. As cliche as it might sound, I think the future is now. So we definitely, all of us need to get out of planning for future skills, future this, to doing and acquiring. I think all of us could do with or need to start thinking about how the change will impact us at a personal level, but also for our organizations. Thank you, Linda.
Thanks, Palisa. Dickson?
I think for me, I think that the key learning is learning agility. Definitely how you think, not what you know, is definitely key. From a personal standpoint, in anyone entering the market, is definitely taking ownership of your actual journey and where you're taking your career. Driving that self-motivation and also your personality to obviously actually drive that. I think as organizations, where we definitely need to come to the fore is definitely how we fuel that growth, ensuring we are flexible in how we create our environments for talent to actually join us, and having the right empathy, and understand that, look, the ways of work has definitely actually changed, and we definitely need to allow that flexibility because of work-life balance definitely to actually come true. Those are key points for me. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Linda. Linda Ruiz.
Yeah, I think for me, just for the people that are listening and participating, I think ask yourself how many years do I still have to work, that I'm going to have to work, or that I want to work, and then how am I going to stay relevant? What am I going to need to start doing to stay relevant? Recently, at an address to some of our employees, I asked that question: how many years do you still have to work? And it was varying. It was 10, 20, 5. And then the next question was, when last did you take up a course, a skill, read a book? And there was a whole different set of results. So that would be my closing remark. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Keep on keeping on. Andrew.
Thank you. So I think both for organizations and anybody that's entering in the job market, I think from an organizational point, once we have the person, then we offer all the fancy perks and all those things, right? That's always important, and then you get the gold watch and then you retire. So I think if we're looking from an HR and people perspective, we need to dissect every single aspect of the hiring process, from the advertisement and looking at the quality of the candidate's journey into joining the organization. And that will stick out compared to anyone else. So was your joining quick, fast? Was HR on it? Did you get your interview quickly? Was the offer promised on time? And those kinds of things are important to the candidate. It's not just when you're in. So it's about making that process slick and very, very seamless. That will add value. And it certainly has on our side. And get rid of things that don't need to be there, that are clutching the process. Because whilst you're busy off making the offer, somebody else is potentially offering that guy lots as well. So make it as quick and as high quality as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Manisha, if you would like to give us your final thoughts.
I think final thought is really around be open to being uncomfortable and being comfortable with that, because that's the new reality. It's about also constantly reinventing yourself so that you learning, you innovating, and be comfortable with in everything that you do something new and be open to making mistakes, because that's the best way to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Lukhanyiso, I'm giving you the final say.
Oh, thanks. Look, it's very simple ones for me. Increased engagement from managers to the staff, assertive engagements in terms of development and where we want to take our business. Actually letting our actions catch up with our plans, as Palisa said, that's a big one. And I think for me, as a last one, just being real assertive about where we are going as a business, so that the great resignation is muted by people actually knowing what you stand for. I wouldn't be the part of the green bank if I don't obviously talk about ESG being obviously a big one that we need to chat about at a later stage as well. But so that's really the overall for me. And probably the last thing is actually being human. That's probably what we've learned over COVID. Really, really just be human and consider what your staff and your teams and your partners in HR are going through. And let's meet each other halfway.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I am stealing a minute of your time as we are over time with a minute, but I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing a conversation of this nature to happen on a panel that has the expertise that you have. I think it's always an eye-opener to also hear from everyone around us, and the gratitude is pouring in on the chat side as well, to have people understand and hear that people of your stature do understand and do see and do want to see the individual within your organization, not just learn, but grow and get comfortable, like Manisha is saying, in change and in the uncomfortable, that box that we create for ourselves, calling our comfort little zone is irrelevant. It doesn't exist anymore, and we should be comfortable with that. I am forever grateful for your time, for your passion, and for sharing that. This has been uplifting. It has been eye-opening, and I'm truly looking forward to the next one, because there's so many things that we haven't touched, because we focused on the individual, which I'm so grateful for. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, my sincerest thanks to everyone. Have a glorious afternoon, and we'll speak soon. Thank you very, very much. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye. Good afternoon. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Oh, the chat's coming in is just gorgeous. Thanks, everybody.
Recording stopped.
Bye.